Hello, everyone. Welcome in. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Jessica Owens, and I am a specialist with the UC Davis Resource Center for Family Focused Practice. And you are joining us for our February Complex Care webinar. Once again, we're so glad you could be here with us today. We just want to say welcome, happy Wednesday, and thank you for joining the call. So as folks are joining today's presentation, it takes a few moments to get everyone connected to audio. So while we're waiting for folks to fully join today's call, for those of you who can hear me, I do have an icebreaker question for you all this morning. I'm going to go ahead and post it in the chat. So, if animals could talk, which animal would have the most attitude? I personally am new to the cat world, and I think cats are definitely coming with a lot of attitude. So my cat is hilarious. Let's see what folks are saying in the chat. Lots of people agree. Cats. Chihuahua. That's actually a really good answer as well. We got a tiger, monkey. Yeah, definitely a cat. Oh, shark. Those are pretty coming with a lot of attitude as well. Oh, honey badger. That was a great answer. All right, awesome. Lots of fun. A chicken. Oh, I love it. Puppies in training. Squirrel. Squirrels are so cute. A hippo. That's also a good answer. Well, thank you all for playing along. Lots of fun responses there. Oh, parrots. Cute. All right, well, we would love to know who is in our audience today. We have a poll to get a better idea of who is joining our call. So my colleague, my UC Davis colleague, James, is going to drop the first poll. So what is your role? Awesome, lots of folks responding so far. I can see the poll before we share it. So I can see that almost 90 of you out of 120 have shared what your role is. See if we can get a few more responses here. Great. Thank you all for joining in and completing the poll. We're officially at 100 of 126, so keep your responses coming. All right, just a few more seconds, James, and we'll go ahead and end this poll and share the results. Great, thank you everyone for participating. And can you all see the results of today's poll? So just looking, it looks like we have about 40% leadership. About 31% of the audience are social workers. We also have some case managers and some peer and parent partners in the group. And definitely very important, we also have lots of former youth in the audience as well. Thanks, James, for sharing that poll. And let's go ahead and drop the next poll. So we want to know a little bit more about what kind of organization you are representing. So please take a moment to complete this next poll. All right, great. We're getting lots of responses from the audience. Thank you all for sharing with us who you are. We just hit 100, so keep your responses coming. We'll have the poll open for about 10 more seconds. All right. James, when you're ready. Okay, can you all see the results from this last poll? Awesome. So we have a lot of folks joining the call today who are representing a county agency, whether it's child welfare, probation, or another county department. We also have some state departments in the room, as well as some community-based organizations. We definitely love to see you all there. Some people from education joining, and for anyone who may have put other in as a response, please share in the chat what kind of organization you are representing today. We would love to hear more about that. All right, James, I think we are good with the polls. Again, you are more than welcome to also introduce yourselves in the chat and share specifically what county or agency you are coming from. Share your name and where you work. And also, if you see a friend or a colleague in the audience, please say hello, reach out to them, say hi. Okay, once again, for those of you who have just joined the call, my name is Jessica. I am a public education specialist with the UC Davis Resource Center for Family Focused Practice, and you are here with us today for our February Complex Care webinar. This webinar is brought to you in partnership between the UC Davis team, the Resource Center for Family Focused Practice, as well as the California Department of Social Services. I do have a few housekeeping items for you all before we get started. I do have a few of my UC Davis colleagues on the call with me today. We have Geraldine Bordage as well as James Williams. So we are here to support you all. Please let us know if there's anything you need. Today's presentation is being recorded. We will have the slides as well as a recording of today's presentation uploaded on our Complex Care website in a few days, in about a week or so. The link to access the recording and to register for future recordings, I've just dropped in the chat. We also have an opportunity to request complex care case coaching. If you are interested in a complex care case coaching session, I am going to drop that link next in the chat. And James, thank you so much for sharing more information on the slide there. And last but not least, if you are interested in requesting a letter of attendance for today's presentation, you can do so through this last link I'm dropping in the chat right now. All right. So if you are just joining, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. We would love to hear from you. I did want to share with you all about another learning opportunity that UC Davis and the California Department of Social Services is working on. We have recently started something called the NMT Learning Collaborative, which stands for the Neurosequential Model of Therapeutics. So here's a little bit more information about NMT and what it is. I can share with you all that the NMT Learning Collaborative meets every third Thursday of each month, which means this Thursday is our next meeting. And here's some more information about what NMT is, who the target audience is, and where you can find some more information. Oh, and it's telling me I'm over my limit in numbers, so give me 1 second. I can't share it in the chat quite yet. 2 parts. There you go. So there's more information about NMT Learning Collaborative, what it is, who the audience should be. And I believe, Geraldine, correct me if I'm wrong, this month's topic area is going to be regarding probation. Is that true?
That is correct.
Okay, so for our probation partners in the house, special note to you, it would be great to have you join the Learning Collaborative this week. Please reach out if you have any further questions about that. Okay, before we begin our program today, which we're really excited about today's topic and the folks we have in the room, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge February as Black History Month. Each and every one of us in this room has been impacted by the contributions Black Americans have made to our society. And right now, I would like us to take a quick look at how one community in particular is honoring Black History Month this year. All right, James.
New tonight at 5, a Valentine's Day proclamation from Governor Josh Green.
Here on February 14th, 2025, it is now One Love Day. Thank you, guys.
Joined by the ohana of the late Bob Marley, Hawaii's governor today proclaimed February as Black History Month and February 14th as One Love Day in Hawaii. It's meant to acknowledge the contributions of Black Americans in Hawaii and also to honor not only Bob Marley's legacy, but also the values of love, unity, and peace that his music embodies.
We are overjoyed to celebrate, our father and the message, the one love message. Yeah, is more grateful. Thank you very much.
My father's legacy is so much more than the music. It's calling for social justice, equality, and that natural love that we should share between each other. Hawaii, thank you so much. Aloha, and I love you. Yeah, one love.
The proclamation.
Thank you, James, for sharing that. I hope you are all finding opportunities to engage with the Black community during this month and celebrate all of the contributions and all of the ways our lives have been impacted by those contributions. Okay, now it's time for me to introduce today's presentation. Like I said, we're incredibly honored that this group of folks could be here with us today. So the title of today's presentation is Engaging Lived Expertise to Inform Complex Care Strategies. As we know, there are many challenges facing youth, caregivers, and providers that can impact outcomes for our youth. Today, we have a panel of lived experts from the Youth Engagement Project here to share their experiences as well as the challenges they faced while involved with the child welfare system. They are here to share helpful insights and strategies that can help improve outcomes for young people who are still in care. And so with that, I would like to introduce the first presenter for today, which is Ayan Jones. Please come on in and take a moment to share with the audience a little bit more about yourself.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ayan Jones. I'm the Program Associate with the Youth Engagement Project. We are one of many programs under the Child and Family Policy Institute of California, and I've been with the organization for about 1.5 years. So excited to be speaking with you all. You can go to the next slide. I'm still looking at the first slide.
James, I'm not able to move it either.
There we go. We did practice this before everyone got on, so it does work. It does work.
Thank you for your patience, everyone. We'll have that PowerPoint up in just one moment.
No worries. Here we go. Okay. So just wanted to kind of sort of introduce our team. You'll get to see them throughout their presentation, but we have Margot Fudge, who is our program director, myself, and then we have 6 ambassadors with us here today. We have 3 lead ambassadors. Well, 2 are here with us today. One you'll see a recording of. But our lead ambassadors support multiple counties in their work and oversee some ambassadors. And then we have 3 additional ambassadors here today, Amy Duarte, Chantel Palmer, and Michael Jaden. And you'll get to meet all of them throughout their presentation. Next slide, please. Okay, just an overview about what we are going to be covering today. So we're going to be defining complex care, kind of explaining a little bit more, talking about what some obstacles are as far as working with complex care youth. We have our 6 ambassadors that you'll get to hear from, and you'll get to hear what their challenges have been, as well as some supports they've received and how they persevered. And then we have some recommendations and solutions for you all. And at the end, we do have some guided questions for our ambassadors, but we also do welcome questions from the group. So we're going to hold off on questions until the very end. Just one disclaimer, although we have our wonderful ambassadors here today, they may be sharing some stories that may be difficult for some of you to hear. So we just want to make sure you all are taking care of yourself. And if anything comes up for you, we do want you to practice self-care and step away if you need to. So just wanted to share that ahead of time. Next slide, please. Okay, a little bit about the Youth Engagement Project. So we are a partnership between the Child and Family Policy Institute of California, or CFPIC, and the California Department of Social Services, CDSS. And so our goal is to improve child welfare policies, programs, and practices by building capacity for youth engagement on the local level in the counties, as well as on the state level. And so we work to engage we actually employ our ambassadors to engage them on local projects to help strengthen the system. So we hire them as contractors and they're paid several hours a month to do the work. So we started about 2015, which is where the CDSS partnership with CFPIC began. And we began essentially formally began to target focus support on counties who were assisting youth transitioning from higher levels of care into family settings. Today, our focus has kind of shifted more to help build the capacity to utilize our lived experts to improve outcomes and focus on practices and system improvement. So I've been with the organization for a year and a half, and during that time, we have grown from 6 counties to 19 counties. Those are counties that we partner with and who we connect our ambassadors with to do project work. And we've also grown from about 12 ambassadors to, I believe we're very close to 40. So we've grown really fast and we're able to utilize our ambassadors to support more and more counties every year. Next slide. Okay, so I mentioned that we have 19 counties that we're currently partnering with. So we have them listed here on the left. So we have as far south as Riverside and LA. And then we, work with Sacramento, Mendocino. So we're kind of all over the state. We have Yolo County and Nevada County as well. So just kind of showing where all our ambassadors, some of our ambassadors are located and we're in care in the counties that we work with. And we do have other ambassadors that support counties that they don't necessarily live or were in care with, but their project interests in child welfare align with the counties that they support. So on the right, you'll see we put together a list of interests from our counties and our ambassadors. Our ambassadors apply just like they apply for a job. And part of the application process is asking what they're passionate about in the child welfare system and what their interests would be should they be hired with our program. We also have an application process with our counties where they do the same. They put projects that they're interested in utilizing their YEP ambassadors for. So this lift is a combination of two where we've seen counties and ambassadors' interests align. So you'll see we have both interested in engaging youth in the CFT CAMS process. We have ambassadors who are interested in work readiness. So a big part of our organization is supporting professional development. We have a lot of counties and ambassadors that are interested in increasing participation in ILP programs and finding topics and training areas that are interesting to our youth. And then we have both aligned in wanting to improve mental health support for youth in care, as well as providing resources for youth all over the all resources across the board, including regarding education and improving education outcomes. Next slide. And I think, yeah, so this is where I'm going to pass it on to our program director, Margot Fudge. She's going to talk more about how we define complex care and a little bit more. So, Margot?
Thanks, Ayan. And Ayan, if you want to put our website in the chat, if anybody's interested in getting more information about our program, we would be more than happy to speak with you. So I first, just to reintroduce myself, my name is Margot Fudge. I am the program director for the Youth Engagement Project. I want to start by thanking CDSS and UC Davis for inviting us to participate today and be part of this discussion. We believe it's critical to listen to lived experts who have experienced the child welfare system firsthand. And so we really want to defer most of our time today to those young adults so you can hear directly from them. But first want to sort of level set around complex care and have a shared understanding of the definition so that we can understand the nuances, the challenges, and opportunities presented by complex care. So according to the CDSS website, complex care is defined as circumstances in which youth have a variety of identified needs across multiple domains that have been unmet, often over long periods of time, by behavioral health, child welfare, probation, education, and other systems. As a result, these youth need high-intensity, individualized treatment options to better resolve challenges and address their needs. So over the next hour or so, you will hear directly from 6 young adults who have had unique experiences based on a variety of factors. And their stories will really highlight the need for greater care coordination, communication, placement options, and education for those working with our young people. So for those of, if we can go to the next slide, please. For those of us that have spent any time around or in the child welfare system, these obstacles and challenges are not going to be new to you. You've heard of them, you've experienced them. And this was based on a recent article that came out from the American Public Human Services Association that really spelled out some of these challenges. So I think many of us are familiar with fragmentation of service delivery and the impact that that has for youth in care. Specifically around a lack of collaboration, siloed services, and just one hand not knowing what the other's doing. When that happens, it results in unmet needs. And you'll often hear in the child welfare space, things fell through the cracks. And unfortunately, what's falling through the cracks is the needs of youth. And so at times that might look like multiple assessments being done with different tools and then having different outcomes, right? So we're not really sure what the need is for the youth. Workforce shortages. We're all in the human services space and we know what that looks like, especially post-COVID. We are in a very challenging time across all of our organizations. And so the workforce shortage really impacts youth. Every time we have turnover at the social worker or provider level, we know that then that case needs to be reassigned, and that case is a child, that case is a family. And so as that worker or provider has to review the documentation, time goes by, months go by, and there's a lapse in services and collaboration. So there's a significant impact every time we have turnover. We know there are limited placement options. This is a real concern for youth that are in care. And we know just a few years ago, youth were returned from out-of-state placements, creating even more of a need locally in California. Strained financial resources are always a concern. And then limited understanding from sort of that caseworker lens. So child welfare social workers are expected to know a little bit about everything. And when youth have complex care needs, when they have medical diagnoses, behavioral diagnoses, social workers may have a general understanding of what that means, but they may not be the expert. And so really being able to understand what the needs of the child are so important. We're still dealing with lingering effects of a post-pandemic landscape, which has really resulted in a polycrisis, both in terms of the workforce shortage, the mental health crisis that we're experiencing. All of that coincides with a reduction in residential beds due to Family First, which is really forcing us to look at the use of congregate care. Next slide, please. So some of the things that, I think as a state, as an organization in the child welfare space, there are a lot of things that are happening around complex care that are moving us in the right direction. One of which is Assembly Bill 2083, which was from 2018. And this requires each county to develop a memorandum of understanding to work collaboratively with other departments and other partners. And sort of seems like a no-brainer, but this was really important to kind of force that coordination that wasn't always happening. And so this requires local entities that serve children and youth in foster care to really work together. The required partners are child welfare, the county mental health plans, regional center, county office of education, and probation. And so I think right now, probably every county has completed and signed their MOU, and many of them are well on their way to really embracing the care coordination that needs to happen as part of AB 2083 by creating their interagency leadership teams and different things. But not all counties are completely there. So I think as we move down the line with this, we'll see greater collaboration and improved outcomes as counties begin to embrace this completely. Next slide, please. So we are now going to turn it over to hear from the young people that are on the call. Unfortunately, Sophia had a last minute situation arise that does not allow her to participate in person, but she was able to record her story to share with you all. And I think it's incredibly powerful. Just a little bit about Sophia. She's an amazing young lady who is currently working in the Guardian Scholars Program at University of California, Santa Barbara. She is getting her master's degree in social work from USC and is an advocate for education equity, among other things. So I'm going to, hopefully we can play her video.
Hello, my name is Sophia Jeffy, and I am a lead youth ambassador for the Child and Family Policy Institute of California. And I have been an advocate for child welfare reform since my entry into the system in 2014. My journey in foster care was characterized by congregate and shelter care, where I found myself living among 40 to 50 other foster youth. Given my age, health profile, and just a general lack of compatible resource families in my county, I spent 18 months living in an emergency shelter that was intended for 30 days or less. As a type 1 diabetic navigating multiple autoimmune issues, I experienced a wide range of issues in foster care due to having complex care needs. My placement options, educational trajectory, and overall feelings of safety while in foster care were definitely impacted as a result. In many ways, my healthcare was weaponized against me. One of the most terrifying examples of this was when a staff member took my insulin pump away for nearly 16 hours. I was 12 years old, living in a children's shelter, using the campus swimming pool with the rest of my cottage, when a seemingly small moment spiraled into something dangerous. Our scheduled swim time had ended, and I wasn't ready to go out yet. I pleaded with my staff for just 15 more minutes, but things escalated really quickly, and I was labeled out of bounds. Staff began making punitive threats, most of which I just ignored. But then I noticed something. While I was in the water, they had taken my insulin pump off of the lawn chair and were refusing to give it back to me. I was immediately panicked. I was pleading with them, trying to explain that I needed to have my insulin pump on an hourly basis just to stay alive. But they either didn't understand or didn't maybe believe me. My pump wasn't returned until the next day when medical staff arrived on campus, at which point I had already gone into DKA, which is also known as diabetic ketoacidosis, and this is a condition that can be life-threatening. The consequences, quite frankly, could have been deadly, and even after that, the whole situation was really disheartening. Because I didn't really feel like there were any meaningful interventions made. Instead, what little autonomy I had was kind of just taken away, because it was so obvious that like my cottage staff were unable to oversee my diabetes management. The campus doctor just made the responsibility theirs, and so I was now responsible for going to the campus medical facility every single time I needed to check my blood sugar, administer insulin, treat a high or low blood sugar. And yeah, if you know anyone with type 1 diabetes, you know that these aren't just like occasional micro tasks, they're constant. Yeah, so that definitely really impacted my sense of autonomy and freedom in foster care. Aside from the obvious physical challenges living in congregate care, I also regularly miss school, medical appointments, child and family team meetings, court appointments, and more due to insufficient vehicles or staff to attend to every youth's needs that day. Similarly, my early high school experience was pretty much devoid of any normal enrichment or socialization. I didn't participate in school activities like football games, dances, tutoring sessions, or club meetings because they required explicit permission from my social worker, which was often really difficult to obtain. Same for the internet. Access to the internet and technology for completing basic homework assignments was severely limited. I had no control over my diet, my meal times, or access to food. And while these things are all seemingly minor individually, these experiences were abnormal for a new high school student, and it significantly impacted my ability to adapt after being removed from my family home. My experience is obviously just one of many that highlights serious gaps in supporting foster youth with complex care needs, but some solutions that are important to me include the following. I think that we need more specialized medical foster homes. I think that we need stronger protections for health autonomy for youth. I think that we need reforms in congregate care to prevent kids from being stuck in shelters without proper care. I think that we need more divestment into reliable transportation so that students don't need to miss school or medical appointments. Yeah, I think foster youth, we deserve equitable access to technology, education, healthcare, the same as anyone else. And so with that, I think there should also be consideration for youth to be able to make normal age-appropriate decisions about their own lives as well, such as, where they want to go to school, trusting them, to administer their insulin, trusting them to have that level of autonomy over their health. Thank you.
So I know that video was recorded. She has a very soft voice, so it might have been hard for people to hear, but I hope you were able to hear her message. I'm going to kind of reiterate some of it through this next slide. But Sophia was in an emergency shelter, which should have been a 30-day stay for 18 months. And as a type 1 diabetic, it was extremely difficult for them to find a placement for her because, as you can imagine, placement required significant training of the caregivers to be able to manage her diabetes. And they weren't able to find anybody willing to step up and take that training and take placement of her. The mention of using her medical equipment as punishment for behavior was something that literally could have killed her, and obviously was a very impactful moment in her childhood. She also has shared and has given me permission to share that while in the shelter, attending school was not a priority. There wasn't any effort made to transport her to school, to encourage her to attend. And her freshman year, she rarely went to school. She had a 0.6 GPA her freshman year. And when she left care, she managed to graduate with a 3.0. So that was also really, really impactful for her. Let's see if there's anything else here. I wanted to just mentioning the lack of staff training, that some of the staff at the facility not really understanding her diagnosis and not, really able to understand the impacts of those decisions. And then you heard from her really needing to have stronger communication across service providers. Had those medical professionals not come in the next day to address, her not having her insulin pump, there might have been a very different outcome. So I am now going to turn it over. I believe Lauren is up next. If you can go to the next slide. And we'll hear a little bit about Lauren's story. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Lauren Mendez. I'm 28 years old, and I'm one of the lead ambassadors with the Youth Engagement Project. So the counties that I help support are Mendocino, Tulare, LA. I think that's it. I've been with the Youth Engagement Project. This year in October, it will be 9 years, and I've held various different roles in my time with the Youth Engagement Project. And I also currently work part-time at our local shelter and transitional housing program for youth who are experiencing crises and being unhoused. And those youth that I work with are ages 13 to 24 up until their 25th birthday. Next slide. So a little bit about my complex needs. So I was placed in 3 different group home facilities, which had both positive and negative experiences with all 3. I know now we refer to group homes as STRTPs, but when I was in care from the ages of 15 to 21, we referred to them as group homes. And in my time in care from the age of 15 to 21, I had 12 different placements that included group homes, resource family homes, shelter care, THP and SILT placements, as well as kinship care. Originally, I was placed into foster care due to severe physical and sexual abuse in my biological home. Upon coming into care, I was diagnosed with complex PTSD. I also had self-harming behaviors, suicide ideation, and also had attempts prior to coming into care, as well as in one of my first resource homes, which led me to my first group home placement. Due to some of the experiences in my biological household, as well as trauma that I experienced while in care, I ended up with also hypersexual behavior, and I was continuously AWOL from placements. In one of my first group homes, I experienced peer recruitment for sex trafficking, and that group home staff, as well as like their management, knew about the young lady who had CSEC um, and had recruited other girls prior to her coming back into this home. And at that time, I was very vulnerable. I didn't know a whole lot about what trafficking was, or I didn't even really understand like all of the different aspects of what that meant. And so I was very gullible. I believed anything that anybody would tell me. And I wanted to get out of being in a group home because obviously I missed my family, I missed my siblings, and so with that came a whole other issues, and there were minimal efforts to keep me safe within that placement. And once I came back to the group home after experiencing sex trafficking, there was there's a lot of lack of support. There was no reports made, no missing persons report made. There was no reporting once I came back to the group home, and no counseling services and no resources. And so they had like a therapist at the group home where I was living, and it wasn't until I really disclosed to my social worker what exactly happened while I was away that the necessary steps were taken, and the police came and took my statement. And that group home was actually fined for the lack of how everything kind of happened once I came back. And so this situation really speaks to lack of staff training when it comes to what does peer recruitment look like, and how can we keep young people safe while in their placements, and really looking at how we're placing young people in congregate care and what that looks like. And so, like, one of the recommendations I share is placing vulnerable youth and youth who may have a history of sexual abuse, placing them with other young people who have CSEC history, or who have recruited young people in the past may not be a good idea. And due to this incident, I was labeled a CSEC youth, and also high risk due to running away and being AWOL, which is away without. I forgot the term, but that's what they called it when you went off property and didn't have permission and essentially ran away. Next slide. Another group home that I had stayed at actually was kind of closer to home, and so I felt a lot safer. I was able to have more family visits and visit my siblings, which made it a lot easier for me in school. And school became my safe haven, away from not having to stay all the time at the group home. And so I wanted to participate in every sport, every club that I could. And I was involved in a lot of extracurricular activities. But due to me now being considered high risk, and I had really lost a lot of trust with my social worker, and it was really hard for them to allow me to be by myself and believe I was going to be where I say I was. And so we went back and forth a lot on how I would be able to participate in extracurricular activities without also notifying certain individuals and coaches that I was in foster care, because I was very private with that aspect of my life and I really wanted that privacy. I was able to work with the group home and my social worker to really come up with a plan to monitor my attendance in my extracurricular activities. And so instead of having like a group home staff call or the teacher call or the coach call the group home to say, Lauren was here from this time to this time, we had like a form that was filled out that didn't have like any identifying information as to me being in foster care. And teacher coach had to put down the times that I was with them and then sign it. And I would bring that back when I would stay after school. And that really allowed me to be able to participate in the activities while also keeping my privacy and being able to like essentially just be a teenager. And so that was really positive, being able to be a part of building a plan because I knew what would work best for me. And I felt like I could cooperate more knowing that like I helped them to, build this plan. It wasn't something that was just given to me and said, this is what's going to happen. I was able to like have a say. And so some of the recommendations are making sure that youth are included in some of the plans that are going on because it does involve them, and they do young people know themselves better and can really help make decisions for their own life, and then really educating STRTPs regarding signs of trafficking and specifically peer recruitment. I see a lot of that even at the shelter that I currently work at, and really noticing those signs and being able to intervene when needed and when necessary to ensure the safety of young people. And I talk a lot about harm reduction to keep youth in their placement. And because I had a lot of trauma and a lot of PTSD from the different experiences that I had a lot of triggers. And when I would be triggered, I would just leave my placement and like go for a walk. And every single time they would call the police and file a missing persons report, even if I was gone for 10 minutes. And it kind of created unnecessary reports in my file and having to explain that also to the judge. And we were able to come up with a plan that I was able to have like walks, a certain amount of walks per day. It was timed. That way I could just use my walks instead of always being considered a runaway and running away from the group home. And that was able to keep me in my placement and keep me from having to go to a higher level of care. And I think that's it. I'm going to go ahead and pass it along to Chantel. Oh no, Michael, sorry.
Mike's up, yeah.
Hello, everyone. My name is Michael Jaden. I'm the youth ambassador. I represent Stanislaus County, and I'm also a student at Cerritos College. My major is political science, poli-sci. And I'm also the ambassador at the Link Next Up program at Cerritos College for foster youth that provides outreach services and engagement programming. Next slide. So my experience in complex care is navigating multiple disabilities. Is having a hard time maintaining friendships and facing like communication challenges and social interactions, like socializing with people that, and I had also, and because I had a hard time socializing due to having multiple disabilities from my childhood to now to adulthood, and I had also had received multiple like speech services and speech therapy since elementary to high school, like over the years. And And I had also had like a hard time expressing my feelings due to having like multiple disabilities. Like the first one is like ADHD from my childhood to adulthood. The second one is autism spectrum disorder. And lastly, the third one is a borderline intellectual functioning. And you also have like you're afraid of being judged by people because because you're having because of your feelings, because you're afraid of people judging you because of your disabilities and the way you're treated of having it. And like you like bottle it up, all your feelings and emotions, and you don't know how to like express them. And you often like feel like left out in social situations, like not knowing like what to do in any like circumstance, basically. Being like silenced by my dad, not wanting to share like what's going on was also another factor because I felt like I was gonna get in trouble, because of it. And so I had to like keep my feelings to myself and not like tell anyone what's going on with me. So I was like afraid of telling people about my feelings and my emotions of what I was feeling uh at the time. I had also faced like a lack of education due to my disabilities, like in early 2020 before COVID-19. Like my foster mom tried to get me like speech services because I had a hard time communicating and I couldn't like form sentences properly. And he had struggled trying to get speech services for me, so he eventually decided to train me and teach me like how to like communicate with people, and that helped me in the long run in my life, throughout the years. And I have had like an IEP since elementary school, since 2010, since I was 6 years old. I had learned very later on as an adult in 2021 or 2022 about like my disability. I wasn't educated on what my disability was, and I didn't know like I had disabilities. I always felt like I was like different, like the way like, my brain functions. Like I had to find out from the school psychologist at school, and he explained to me like what my disability was. So the positive support that I had like a lot of like resources and people that supported me along the way. The first one is my resource family, my foster mom. He teach me life skills and independent living skills, and he got me connected with the Harbor Regional Center. And the Harbor Regional Center helped me in my goals, like to apply for like certain documents like the Real ID and passport and SSI. And they also did like certain tests for my diagnosis of having multiple disabilities over the years. And I can, keep receiving, their services like for like the rest of my life as an adult. The the Link Next Up program at the Cerritos College for Foster Youth, they helped me get a job for like the youth engagement project, and they also helped me in resume building, and I'm also given like priority registration, like to register for classes and like participate in social events. They gave me a job as ambassador to help with social events per semester and also do other panels, like the LAUSD, and they and with interviewing skills and like workshops that are like career focused, like resume or cover letter. I also receive currently disability services at Cerritos College. It's called SAS, which stands for Student Accessibility Services. They help with organizational skills and study habits and time management and note taking. And they also I'm also able to take exams and quizzes at their building at like a quiet space, and I'm given extra time instead of doing it in class, like, and like in front of people, which can be like anxiety during, you know, an exam. And you can also like send like a letter to your professor about your disability that you want like a note taker to take notes for you in class or like record the lectures if you're having trouble understanding like that the lecture or the material. The the mentors that I've considered at the college is my political science professor because like I'm interested in being a political scientist, and he had like a lot of experience and an understanding of like American politics and international relations. So like I look up to him as my mentor, like for my major in political science. Now I'll hand it over to Chantel.
Hello, everyone. Can everyone hear me?
Yep.
My name is Chantel Palmer. I am currently one of the ambassadors for the Youth Engagement Project as part of the Child and Family Policy Institute of California for LA County. My entitlement runs deep with foster youth because I'm one, and I would love to make sure that they are supported. I advocated for their important needs and that they're comfortable in their own skin. I am currently a senior at California State University, Dominguez Hills, majoring in criminal justice to soon become a criminal defense attorney. I'm currently working for the Long Beach Courthouse as a Justice Court member, helping with family and housing law, as well as restraining orders. Next slide. Disability in the context of my experiences has shaped many aspects of my life in profound ways. I have epilepsy, a condition that causes unpredictable seizures. Despite this, I didn't receive the level of support I needed. For example, I wasn't offered any alternative transportation beyond buses and trains, which made me feel unsafe. Knowing that I could have a seizure anytime without someone to help or protect me made traveling in public spaces terrifying. The lack of options for safer transportation left me feeling isolated, and I struggled to manage my condition independently. Another difficult part of my journey was being forced into therapy. I was told that if I didn't attend therapy, my sister could face serious consequences. While I understood that the intention was to help, it felt like I had no choice in the matter. Therapy was something I wasn't ready for, and at that point, it seemed to make things worse rather than better. Every person's healing process is different, and no one considered my feelings or where I was in that process. There could have been alternative ways to support me, or at least a more empathetic approach to what I was going through. Living in foster care, I often felt I lacked the essential lifestyles that others my age were learning. Without consistent guidance, I struggled with everyday tasks like budgeting, cooking, and managing my personal life. While others may have had family members helping them prepare for independence, I felt like I was left to figure it out on my own, often failing and learning by trial and error. The absence of this support made transitioning into adulthood even more difficult, as I had to face these challenges without the safety net that many of my peers had. Aging out of the foster care was another major hurdle. Turning 18 marked a significant shift as I lost access to the resources that were once available to me. Without the safety of a family structure or the financial support that many young adults rely on, I was left to navigate the world on my own. Finding stable housing, securing a job, or pursuing higher education became overwhelming without the necessary support systems in place. The transition was tough, and I often felt like I was set up to fail rather than to be given a chance to thrive. Ultimately, my experiences with disability, forced therapy, and aging out of foster care have shaped my perspective on life and the importance of support. I've learned that everyone's needs and healing processes are different. y- Are are different, and it's essential to approach them with compassion and understanding. The lack of resources and guidance during critical stages of my life has made it clear how vital it is for young people, especially those facing disabilities or aging out of foster care, to have access to adequate support and opportunities to build independent lives. Um, some of the um, positive attributes that I could take in was you have to kind of go through the difficult times to see uh, the great things that that could potentially happen. Although I didn't have as much family as I wished I was able to have, or I wish that was able to support, there were um, I did in fact have two sisters that were willing to support me through the process of being foster care and navigating through the system and being able to build me to into who I am today. And with that, I would like to turn it over to Amy or Alex.
Hey there, everybody. My name is Alexander Crossman. I'm also one of the lead ambassadors here for CFPIC. It's a pleasure to be with all of you today. I'm really thankful to have the opportunity to share with you guys. This is a humongous wall of text, I'm just realizing, so let me try to do my best to consolidate it for you. So I entered the foster care system when I was 8 years old. I had spent 15 years in it between entry and exit. And my time and care was very all over the place. So I entered at a shelter. I then quickly transitioned into a group home setting, now known as an STRTP. Afterwards, I then was injected into foster care and moved between 4 different homes before I was then actually moved back into shelter care before being injected into THP. So my experience is very broad. I've had quite the experience in different realms, and uh, in summing up all of those different things, some of the things that I really struggled with when I was younger and when I was a teenager were being held accountable to my actions and being always truthful. As I've grown older, one of the things that's always stuck with me that one of the counselors said is, you know, Alex, it's one thing to lie to someone else, but it's more important that you don't lie to yourself, right? And so that's something that I hadn't recognized until I was maybe in my mid-teenage years, that I was actually lying to myself as a coping mechanism for all the stuff that I was really shameful about or really upset with myself about. Um, as well as specific things that I struggled with in care, like in a group home setting. Um, you know, at the time, this was a bit in the past where point cards and more robust point systems were used, and it's not really that way anymore. But just um, being so militant about every single thing. One of the things that always stuck out to me was the individual giving me the care that I needed was actually usually on the same side as me in terms of how this policy stinks in one way or another. And one of the things that's always stuck with me is how the policies that we create have this everlasting impact in many different areas. Unfortunately, it can create this you know, as a youth, you get the aftermath, but also as an individual working for that youth and working for that system, you become someone who no longer believes in it because you don't even believe in the policy that's being handed down because the policy doesn't make sense for that individual. And that's something that, as I've gotten older, it has only made more and more sense. I remember some of the biggest things that supported me in becoming who I am today was actually just constantly going to public school and constantly not being diverted into this isolated world of foster care. Like constantly being pushed to my limit and going back and playing sports in high school or going back and doing extracurriculars or going back and doing the GATE program where you're, you know, messing with robots or whatever. Like all those things where I was pushed to my limit and I was encouraged to not be around other individuals that were in the same echo chamber as me actually really supported me in growing and forcing me to acknowledge my situation and like take responsibility for it, but realize that it's not my fault. And that was really big for me. Let's jump to and take a look at the next slide. So when I was thinking about what policies and procedures I think are going to be helpful to not just the individual, but also to the team that is designing said individual policies. I really wanted to focus on really four things. The first one was accountability. Accountability, I've noticed over the years, now working in policy and now working for a shelter, I've noticed across many different lanes has become something that is less and less held to as a standard. But accountability is what I had always seen as how people loved me when I was going through care. You know, if someone didn't care about me, they never held me accountable to the words that I had or the actions that I did. They always just let me scoot by and say whatever. It doesn't matter, right? He's going to have to deal with this later on. But when they held me accountable, it actually made me stop, pause, and listen and learn about what was actually going on and what my actions were making, right? And what they were giving people as a vibe or interaction. Some of the other stuff is like goal setting. So SMART goals. SMART is an acronym for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. Again, kind of bouncing off the idea of being accountable, but it was something that always like when I always got the buy-in, like when someone else gave me a goal and then I sat there and like I was like, okay, I do want this to happen. It doesn't feel really achievable right now, but if I break it down into baby steps and I get the buy-in and I'm invested just as much as my team is invested, magically things started to happen. And I was able to slowly work towards them and actually build up confidence in myself. Hobbies and interests. I think sometimes what I always felt like, especially coming out of foster care, was I always felt like a personal improvement project. So realizing that we're human and we're not supposed to be this giant personal improvement project all the time is something that I hope a lot of people can take home. And so just supporting those, especially older, like 15, 16, 17, like get them into chess, get them into rock climbing, get them into the gym, get them into soccer, like something kind of to get out of their head a little bit and into their bodies some more. And then finally, like emotional skills. I mean, this is kind of like, I feel like I'm hitting it on the nose a little bit and it's very obvious, but I think sometimes having some of our young people, whenever they're available and ready, to really hammer home and try to learn as much as they can about who they are and like what's the difference between like feeling butterflies in your chest versus your stomach? What's a headache on the front of your face versus the back of your face? Like all of these things are, I would hope, are very normal for everyone sitting in this room. But it's not for a lot of our kids, and they don't know the difference between if they're sick or if they're nervous or if they're have a crush on someone or if they have, you know, a GI problem today. You know what I mean? Like that's just not something that they typically know about, and everything seems to be an ibuprofen or a Tylenol fix nowadays. But it's but it's not that simple. And so I think letting our young people kind of experiment a little bit, but not, you know, fall so far that they're actually hurting themselves, I think is always a good thing. But emotional skills I've always noticed as a big improvement, which helps everything else here too. Thank you so much, guys, for listening to my part. And I have one more other person to hand off to. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Amy Duarte. I am a youth ambassador. I am 24 years old with 14 years of life experience. I entered system at 7 years old and got out when I was 21. And I was experiencing the navigating complex care within the foster care system in Los Angeles County. I'm currently a senior here at UC Davis. I'm pursuing a BA in political science with minors in sociology and Chicano studies, focusing on criminal justice and political sociology. And my upbringing in Los Angeles and my experience within the, within the foster care system have shaped my dedication to advocating for foster youth and addressing systematic inequities beyond academics. I am passionate about policymaking and community engagement with a particular focus on supporting foster youth and creating equitable opportunities for them through nonprofit work. My goal is to drive meaningful change by pushing forward initiatives that empower vulnerable communities and redefine justice wherever it is needed. I aspire to use my lived experience and education to become a policymaker, working to transform the foster care system and ensure every child has access to resources and the support they need to thrive. Thank you. So I am going to give you guys a brief lesson on what my diagnosis is. I have many, but I'm just going to focus on one. So my diagnosis is osteomalacia, also known as rickets. So for those people who don't know, I have a picture here. Normal bones is on the left side, so that's how people's legs normally look. And people with rickets is on the right side, so that's how people with rickets legs look. Unfortunately, I have the one in the middle, which is in, I would say, one of the worst cases, because it is much harder to get surgery for it because you have to do the tibula, fibula, and then your knees and your ankles, and it's a lot of surgeries. So, with that being said, I'm just going to focus on that one just because it's the most meaningful one, and the one where I had the most complex care neglect. So, as mentioned about surgeries, I did have 3 surgeries. One of them was at age 9, the other one was at age 10, and then my last one was at age 15. So, with that said, my story highlights the challenges that many foster youth face when it comes to receiving the medical attention they need, challenges that often go unnoticed but have lasting impacts. As mentioned, I have many complex care needs, but today I'll only be sharing one specific situation, the one that stands out because of how uniquely challenging it was. This experience not only affected my health, but also exposed the systematic barriers that foster youth with medical needs continue to face. I have undergone 3 surgeries, 2 of which required me to move homes just to receive the care I needed. The reality was that some foster parents didn't want the responsibility of taking me to the hospital or caring for me during my 6 month recovery periods. I remember being in a foster home and I needed my follow up surgery at age 10. And that foster parent was like, if you need a surgery, you're not going to be under this roof. Or if you want to stay under this roof, you're not getting the surgery. You choose. So I chose to get a surgery. And luckily, I had a social worker who was able to put me back with the same foster parent who helped me with my first surgery. With that being said, instead of focusing on healing, I was forced to deal with the added stress of instability and uncertainty, constantly wondering if I would be placed with a caregiver who was willing to support my recovery. The emotional toll of being uprooted during such vulnerable times was overwhelming. I wasn't just dealing with the physical pain of surgery, I was also struggling with anxiety of not knowing where I would live next or if my new placement would take my medical needs seriously. Beyond the surgeries themselves, my struggles continued. I was unable to attend physical therapy because the foster parent I was placed with simply didn't have the time to take me. This lack of follow up care had long term consequences for my health, but in the foster care system, medical care is often seen as a privilege rather than a right. When something as critical as physical therapy is denied due to logistical inconvenience, it raises questions how many other foster youth are left to deal with untreated medical conditions simply because their caregivers are unwilling or unable to help. Even routine medical needs were neglected. Some foster parents refused to take me to my checkups or fill my prescriptions, believing that I didn't need my medication, that it was a waste of resources. But that decision wasn't theirs to make. The system placed me in their care, yet there were no safeguards in place to ensure they actually provided the medical support I needed. It was heartbreaking to realize that my health was not seen as a priority, that my well-being was considered optional. What made things even worse was that my first social worker allowed this neglect to continue. She never wanted to listen to me, nor did she ever conduct a one-on-one with me, which is something that you're supposed to do as a social worker. No matter how many times I tried to bring up the issue I was facing, my voice was ignored. It felt like I was invisible, like my concerns didn't matter. When she got pregnant, luckily, other social workers began stepping in to in on me. But even then, I was never given a private space to share what was really happening until one day that finally changed when a new social worker came to speak to me. Unlike the others, she didn't allow my foster parent to control the conversation or dismiss the concerns. She made it clear that she would not be walked all over like the social workers before her. In that moment, I realized I could trust her. For the first time, I felt heard. I told her everything, the neglect, the medical needs that had gone unmet, and how I had been pushed aside for so long. She acted quickly, and by quickly, I meant very, very fast. Removing me from that home and refusing to return my case to my previous social worker because she had actively assisted in hiding the neglect. However, during my last surgery, I was finally placed in a great home, one that I found myself. I moved in with a great friend and her family. And even though I was their first and last foster youth, they made sure that all my medical needs were met. For the first time, I didn't have to fight to be taken to appointments, to have my prescriptions filled, or to receive the post-surgical care I needed desperately. Because of them, my legs wouldn't look the way they do now. Now, instead of my legs looking like the photo in the middle, they somewhat resemble the photo on the left, almost normal bones. Because of them, their care, their attention to my recovery, and their commitment to my well-being made all the difference. They showed me what true support looks like and what I am incredibly grateful. They kept track of my health in a way that no other placement had, and their support during my recovery process proved that with the right care, foster youth can truly heal and thrive. With that being said, my story is not unique. Many foster youth with complex care medical needs experience similar neglect and barriers to care. This is why systematic change is so critical. We need policies that hold foster parents accountable for providing medical care, ensuring that no child has to struggle for access to essential treatment. Foster youth should never have to choose between stability and their health. I share my story today not just to highlight the failures in the system, but to push for solutions. And because every child, regardless of their circumstances, deserves the right to proper medical care, dignity, and a chance to heal without unnecessary obstacles. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. I just want to pause for a moment as we sort of reflect back on what we heard from our 6 young adults. The perseverance, resilience, strength, courage, bravery, all of those adjectives to describe you all sharing your stories. Thank you so much. I wish I could say that we went out and found 6 youth that had these stories. These are not unique. We have 37 youth ambassadors working with our program. We sent an email asking who wanted to be part of this webinar. 15 of them have congregate care, complex care experience that were interested. And unfortunately, they all had stories that that showed gaps in the system. Youth in care deserve better, right? So I think now we're going to kind of move into what some of those solutions might be. I'm going to do sort of a macro level, and then Lauren is going to come back in and talk about some of the more youth specific ones. But how do we really build on AB 2083, which is, the foundation for doing this care coordination and really cross-sector work that is going to be so important to make sure that young people don't fall through the cracks. So making sure those collaborative partnerships are taking place across community-based organizations. How do we utilize Medi-Cal to improve service delivery? And how do we really incentivize caregivers to take youth that might have complex care needs? We heard several different examples of youth really having sort of medical neglect in care, which just can't happen. Mike brought up a great point when he talked about, he found out about his diagnoses from a school staff member. And while that's great that that person, shared with him his diagnoses, he probably should have found out, before then from some other caring adult. And so how do we make sure that we're more forthcoming and transparent with youth when regarding their diagnoses as appropriate based on their age and, ability to understand those diagnoses? There are some great opportunities with the Children's Crisis Continuum that's happening at the state level with the pilot counties, and looking at how do we utilize some of the creating funding opportunities to have more placement options for complex care youth, leveraging crisis stabilization, the intensive services foster care beds, and things like that. Including those enhanced foster care programs. So really trying to bolster the training that caregivers need so that we have a greater array of caregivers that are able to take some of our higher acuity youth. and creating specialized support for them. So I'm going to turn it back over to Lauren to talk about the next couple slides.
So ways to support youth with complex care needs. I know I touched on a couple of these when I was speaking earlier, but improving supports for caregivers to include training, different types of communication skills, and how to recognize the support of each individual needs that young people may have. And then build individual care plans with goals, rewards, consequences that fit the needs of that specific youth, and really kind of creating more of a home environment to feel more like a home setting. And utilizing lived experts to assist with both the hiring and onboarding of STRTP staff, including the development of staff trainings. Next slide. A few others are identifying trauma specialists for youth with disabilities who may struggle with communication. And like I said in the previous slide, really being able to, recognize different communication styles, especially with young people who may have disabilities. Improving cross-system communication between the caregivers, medical providers, social workers, to ensure that medical needs are being met. Ensuring that psychological and mental health services for youth who are struggling are provided. I know, like in my time in care, I did not have a set mental health services. Like they were always changing, and it took a very long time to access those when it really should have been done right at the beginning, knowing the trauma that I had coming into care. And then providing transportation for youth who have disabilities, and really looking at the transportation resources in the county that young person is that is placed in. And then I will go ahead and pass it to Chantel.
How has the work done with the Youth Engagement Project supported change? Well, we have seen that it has utilized lived experts to develop staff trainings for STRTPs, utilize live experts to assist with hiring of STRTP employees, youth review of RFPs for therapeutic services, youth with complex needs who share their experiences to recruit caregivers, youth advisory boards, youth-led discussions regarding pro-social activities in congregate settings, and youth representation on interagency leadership teams.
Thanks, Chantel. So this slide just represents some of the various projects that our youth have worked on with counties to really infuse their voice and lived expertise to make system change. So some of these are really cutting edge, like Alex has been part of standing up an STRTP in Sonoma County and helping develop the staff trainings from his own lived expertise. He was also able to be part of the hiring panel. So really trying to push the envelope on the spaces that youth are able to be in to use their voice. All right, so if we can go to the next slide, please. We're gonna, we have some questions that our youth are prepared to answer, but before we do that, we wanted to open it up to the participants and see if there are any questions that you all have. And we will then go to our questions if there aren't any. Anybody have any questions?
Yeah, and folks, please feel free to use the raise your hand feature. We can call on you directly and you can ask your question to today's panel, or you're also more than welcome to post the question in the chat. Yes, Marco.
Mine is more of a statement to the former youth in and out of STRTPs. I, before becoming a resource parent, worked at a group home, and I know exactly what they're talking about, these youth. And I didn't want it to look like that. At one point, while in a group home, I became the manager there, and I had to let go of 7 staff. So I had to revamp everything that the staff were doing that got away with for so long. The group eventually started closed down a couple months later. And I didn't want to just stand on the sidelines and watch some of these youth get sent to other shelters or other SCRTPs. And the youth I have in placement are those youth. And let me tell you, it's more than basic needs, right? The whole thing with medical and even school. And I'm big on school. I just didn't sit home and check boxes. I made sure that my boys were going to school and that they were learning. Even got one of my boys out of a non-public school where he struggled for 4 years onto a comprehensive campus finally after years of IEPs and educational advocates to an attorney. And my boy, which I also just adopted in November, is now graduating. I mean, imagine if I had not put in the work, who knows where he'd be at this non-public school. And it goes for every single youth that we push education and that we're present. I know that some of the youth that come in from STRTPs have this mentality like, oh, you're just like, you're going to be just like that group home staff, or you're going to be just like this, and I do believe that in every home, there needs to be structure. And I'm so grateful for the opportunity having to work in an STRTP to better understand what the youth come from. So kudos to them for telling their stories. And I tell my boys, when you age out, whether you stay with me, as a SILP, or you go onto THP, go tell your story. There's people like ourselves that truly are invested and that care. And there has to be more out there. So once again, kudos to them. And I hope that this helps our agencies be a little more present, in stopping by, actually going to some of these STRTPs, group homes, and research homes to see how the boys are doing, whether boys, females, whoever, how they're living, because I think it takes an entire village to make this work.
Thank you so much, Marco, for sharing and for, making your comment. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think it's important for us to help young people explore who they want to be instead of telling them who we think they should be. I do see we did get one question posted in the chat from Patty. And the question is, how can counties leverage the youth that are already involved in the Youth Engagement Project to be part of local AB 2083 infrastructure? So that was the first part of the question. And the second part is, what capacity building was provided to these youth to build up their skills to be ambassadors?
Thanks, Jessica. I can take that first question, and then I'll see if Ayan wants to take the second one. But so for the counties that we're already working with that have YEP ambassadors, we definitely encourage them to consider having young people as part of their ILT. It does take a little bit of a culture shift. Some counties are very far along on their journey of using youth voice and youth engagement and do have youth as part of their ILT. Some counties are just starting to scratch the surface and aren't, they may not be comfortable yet in that next step. And so it's a conversation. Part of that it has to be working with your ILT to schedule a meeting that allows youth to be available. They may not have traditional schedules. They're not always available 8 to 5. As you heard, many of them are in college. They may have other jobs. And so being flexible to accommodate the schedules of the youth, and then really being open to hear their voice. So we are working with a county who just started having the youth be present. And, the calls are virtual. They're not necessarily engaging them in the conversation. So we're just starting out. And it's definitely a continuum of getting their voice to be actually heard. Ayan, do you want to talk a little bit about the capacity building and the development for our youth ambassadors?
Yeah, so our ambassadors are as young as 16, and our oldest is 28, and we average 16 to 25. And so they're all kind of different levels as far as like professional development. It might be their first job ever, it might be, their second, third job that they're doing all at once. So they're all kind of at different levels as far as their capacity building, or we call it professional development. So a big part of my role, as well as our lead ambassadors, so we have Lauren Mendez and Alexander Crossman on here, is to help support ambassadors in that professional development. So a huge thing that when I meet with new hires that they're looking for is public speaking practice and support. Some are good with virtual and struggle with in person. Some are great in person and struggle with virtual. Some are good with young people and struggle with adults and professionals. So just kind of meeting where they're at and figuring out what areas they want to grow in is a big part of our program. We don't want to just ask them to give to us, give to the counties, share their stories. Want to make sure that they are developing themselves professionally. I mean, some need more than others. I would probably say that the ones on the call are super confident and kind of came to us with not as much support, but we do have a couple who we've been working on, over the course of the last year and a half. So that's a big part of our program, and we just want to be able to prepare youth for how, when, where, how, what's appropriate as far as sharing their story, and not just sharing their story, but utilizing their experience to inform those processes and programs and procedures. So it's not always them being in a space like this sharing exactly what happened or their experience, but saying like, okay, knowing internally this was my experience, maybe in congregate care. If I were meeting with Tulare County and they're talking about, improving their congregate care settings, how would I want to see it different, look different based on my experience that would help make it better for youth that are currently there. So hopefully that answers that.
Thank you, Ayan. That was very helpful. I did see another question in the chat. Do the ambassadors think FERS would have helped if it was available to them while in the foster care system? And for those of you who are not familiar with that acronym, that stands for the Family Urgent Response System.
So I would throw that to any of, I don't know firsthand if it, okay, Amy, you want to?
Amy has her hand.
Yeah, thank you. So I honestly think it might be like a yes and no answer, really depending on the family. And I know, like in my instance, I was able to do kinship, which I know it's different. But before I did kinship, the social worker at the time wanted me to be with family. And I do remember that my biological mother refused. So because of her refusal of putting us with our family, we weren't able to have that as an option. But if I were given the opportunity to decide whether I wanted that as an option, rather than my biological mother, I honestly think that I would have chosen it, because, well, one of the promoting factors is that it promotes keeping families together. And building on that family relationship. So personally, I would have said yes to it. I know some people that would say no to it. So I do think it's based on situation and circumstance and different for everybody. So I don't know if that answered the question.
Thanks, Amy. I know Lauren has her hand up, and I just want to make sure. I'm not sure if all of our youth ambassadors are familiar with FERS since it's fairly recent. But Lauren, I'll let you go. I think you are familiar with FERS.
Yeah, I was actually on the implementation team with FERS at CDSS, and when we were talking about like what FERS would look like in a congregate setting, it was really like there was a lot of gray area because like the staff who are at the STRTP are supposed to have that training to be able to deal with the crises that come up with young people, and they don't always send somebody out to, like, it really depends on like the situation and what's going on. I think like for me in some of the situations that I was in, having access to like another entity to be able to like talk through maybe like what was going on could have been helpful, but with the way that like FERS works, I don't know how helpful it would have been with the situations that took place in like the group homes. But I would say like for my resource families and the reasons why I was always having to move placements, I think FERS definitely could have helped me stay in my placement for sure.
Thank you, Lauren. All right. Any other questions coming up from our audience? Again, you can post them in the chat or raise your hand to come off mute. I do see one more question. It says, I am in a temporary position as the STRTP coordinator with Santa Clara County. As a social worker working with youth and STRTPs, what is a piece of advice to best support the youth while in the program and their transition out of an STRTP?
Can I jump in on this one?
Yes, please.
Please.
So I have been one of the members who've started the STRTP at the shelter in Sonoma County. And so I'm very familiar with all the different parts and components required in order to make it work. And to be on both sides of it, where you're both the social worker and also on the floor doing the work with the youth, I see honesty. I always just try to remember this: honesty without kindness is brutality, and honesty or kindness without honesty is manipulation. And I say that because I think it's really easy for us to get into this headspace of like, you're going to go back to a certain home, or you're going to go back to your parents, or you're going to go back to X, Y, and Z. And that's kind of the ultimate goal, is like some sort of family reunification. And I think it's okay to also be honest and say, you know, you're here because your parents failed. It's not that you had done anything wrong, but it's important to recognize and be truthful about that process, because again, kind of like what one of the members had basically said earlier, of like he had to find out the truth from a counselor at school, is like this truth will come out eventually. And it's you know, beating around the bush for an extended period of time is never going to be helpful. But I guess so just always be truthful in like the most reasonable way possible. Like obviously don't, you know, different audiences, right? But as well as make sure you compartmentalize and do your best to not take it home with you. You know, this is a job that can really kind of like take you out pretty quick and early if you're not compartmentalizing and take care of yourself. Like your days off, you really need to be off, not like going home and thinking about what you want to do or what this kid should do. That's time spent still working. And so give yourself a break and be kind to yourself too.
Thank you, Alex. I did see another, yes.
I can also answer.
Oh, yes, please.
Um, I would also say asking the young person like what supports that they may need, or what do they think would be best for them transitioning out of like a STRTP. Um, I know when I was coming out of a group home and into my first foster home, I was thrown wrap services, and um, I eventually just stopped seeing them, refused really to see them, because it became too much for me. And I just felt there were too many hands in, and nobody was communicating. It was very frustrating. And I also like didn't feel like I like had a voice. So the only voice that I had was to say I'm not participating in these services. And it was actually a really huge relief for me once once I like cut my ties with wraparound services, because um I feel like it gave me a little bit more freedom to like do things, and be able to have more say in like what was going on, because I just felt like there was just too many people with their opinions, and it unfortunately just didn't work for me. And so without having like all those extra hands, I was asked like, what can we do to support you in mitigating some of the behaviors that I had, whether that was like self-harming, whether that was running away. Um, and so yeah, I would definitely just say, ask the young person, give that question to them because they know them best, and what works well for them.
Beautiful. Thank you both. I think that was very well said. I did see one other question in the chat. And before I take the next question I saw in the chat, was there anyone else that wanted to come off mute and ask a question directly? Okay, I'm gonna take this question and then I think we can move to the questions that the presenters brought today. The last question was, it was mentioned that intensive training for caregivers may better prepare and equip them to care for youth with complex needs. Is there a specific training curriculum that counties have used? How did they get caregivers buy-in to do extra trainings? And this, this, if someone on the panel has some thoughts or answers to this question, as well as if anyone in the room who has experience or expertise with this question, we would love to hear from you as well. But first, let's see if anyone from the presentation today would like to respond.
Well, I appreciate Ellie asking this question. It is a difficult one to answer. I personally don't have the answer to it, and I am very eager to see what others on this call, may have developed in their counties or organizations.
While folks are thinking, I can share that resource parents in particular are required to do a certain number of trainings per year. That is a state requirement. And that is for all resource parents, whether they are licensed through a county or a resource family agency. All caregivers, resource parents in California are required to do a certain number of annual trainings per year in certain topic areas. I can say that over the years, different counties have had a different number of hours that they have required the foster parents in that county maintain. I do know that in many regions, there are programs for foster parent education. The one where I locally live the foster parent education resource is run through the community college, and that training program is open to all individuals in the community that are interested in taking those trainings. They're not required, but they are available. So those are just some of the thoughts and answers that are coming up for me. I don't know if anyone else wants to share or contribute what you all have going on locally in your area. And Mark, I do see your hand raised, and I do believe you mentioned you have been a resource parent. So go ahead and share what you've got.
I just want to say that had I not worked at a group home, SCRTP, that I would not have entertained the higher risk populations, right? But see, that was my thing. I'm always up for a challenge. And the boys that do come into care, and I'll give you a number, I have 6. And you know, all teenagers, high schoolers, and at that rough age, are here because of that experience. And I'm so grateful for, you know, through all those hardships and challenges and collaborations with probation, school administrators, social workers, from peer partners, wraparound, I couldn't do it alone. And I tell you that at times it does feel like, oh my goodness, I don't get to clock out, because you have those moments where you could have 4 or 5 feeling a certain kind of way, especially around the holidays. And had, like I said, going back to, had it not been to having worked in that with that population, that I think I'd find it rough. Because see, at placement, we decide through an interview, can we bring this year? Is it going to mesh well? And you determine there. So for the most part, I have never said no, because I'm confident that that we'll make it work. And I've maintained stability with these youth and form connection and attachment because of that experience. And that is important.
Thank you so much for sharing, Marco. We really appreciate it. All right. I think it would be great for us to take this time to move back to the questions our presenters brought with them today. Also, while we are taking a look at these last few questions, we're going to go ahead and drop our evaluation for today's presentation. Please, please, please take a moment to complete that evaluation. Your feedback is extremely important to us. We do take it into consideration for future webinars. But yeah, while we're answering these last questions, go ahead and take a moment to complete that poll. And it should have just popped up for you all.
Thank you. So the first question that we'll have Mike and Alex each answer is, what is one thing you wish your placement had known, or a skill they had to improve your experience?
Can I go?
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Okay, so one I wish for, like, for my placement is that I wish my foster mom understood how to give me instructions into smaller steps. It's because of my ADHD diagnosis, and it was like difficult for me to follow instructions. So like I have to write down the instructions on paper to remember what I have to do. Which I had like a hard time back in 2020, and then as I got older.
Thanks, Mike. That's a really concrete, important step. And Alex, I want to hear from you, but I also feel like there's been a couple of requests in the chat for you to repeat your quote about honesty and kindness. So when you get a moment, if you could share that again, but I'll let you answer the question.
Yeah, totally. So basically it's honesty without kindness is brutality, and kindness without honesty is manipulation.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. What is one thing I wish the placements had known, or a skill they had? I wish they had bigger budgets so they can hire people to do more work and have better training. I think everybody who did the work was amazing and they loved it and they did it because they were actually in it. But I wish they got paid more so they can treat it more as a career and not a stepping stone.
Yeah, that's great. It's really important feedback. Okay, one other question. How have you used your lived experience to make system change around complex care? And that's specifically for Lauren and Amy.
Did you say just for me, or was there another person?
Yeah, you and Amy are have this question.
So I've worked in a few different STRTPs since coming out of AB 12 when I was 21. And during my time being able to work in those congregate care settings, I was able to help their management and leadership team revamp some of the way their program worked, and explain to them that, you know, not one size fits all. And I remember telling them a story about, like, I was 16, a junior in high school, and their program was like it was like red, yellow, and green, and like your name was on this board, and if you had so many points, you were like, your square was green, and like, you know, you had certain privileges, and then you had like, if you had so many points and it was yellow, and then like red meant like no privileges. And like that just is not going to work for someone who's in high school. And like they had younger girls in the home, but also younger girls who did have disabilities, and that worked for them because you know, they were visual, they understood like the red, green, and yellow aspect of like what their behaviors and what they were doing throughout the week got them as rewards. And so and another STRTP had implemented that into their program, and all of these girls were either like juniors or seniors and aging out into AB 12, and some of them were 18, and like that doesn't work for like that age group. And so really being able to help them kind of come up with something different while working was a really cool turnaround for me. And also now working in a shelter placement for young people, and being able to use my lived experiences to help even our shelter and our transitional housing program with their policies for the young people that are coming in. And then I also had the opportunity a couple years ago to help an STRTP basically from the ground up. So like the placement of the STRTP, like where they wanted it, because they were going to be housing girls who were specifically had C-sec population, and then, you know, coming up with specific trainings for staff that were going to be working in that home, and then like a reward system or the program that they had. And so so those are some of the things I have worked on and been able to use my lived experience to kind of help you know, with complex care and all that goes into the congregate care settings.
Thanks, Lauren. Amy, did you want to add?
No, it's okay. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. And Margot, did you have anything else you wanted to say before I begin to wrap us up in the last 5 minutes here?
Just want to thank everybody for attending and the insightful questions, and, you know, really being present to listen and hear the youth. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that, Margot. So I just really would like to echo what Margot just said and say that it is with reverence and gratitude that I thank each one of today's presenters for your honesty and vulnerability in sharing both the challenges you experienced as well as your success stories. Each one of today's presenters highlighted the need to increase caregiver and provider training and education to better support youth with complex care needs. Autonomy is the ability to make independent choices, while agency is the sense of control and ability to act on those choices. Both are extremely important for a person's sense of well-being and ability to thrive. Sophia and Lauren's stories in particular highlighted the importance of collaborating with versus power over when working with our youth. Mike, I just want to give a huge shout out to you and say thank you so much for being here today. And I have to admit, it was quite challenging to hear that you did not have someone talk to you about your diagnoses until someone, a school staff member, had that conversation with you. So I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your story with us today. Alex, I really appreciated what you said about youth not being a personal improvement project. These young people are human beings with ups and downs and highs and lows. I appreciate you reminding us to help young people explore their hobbies and interests. And I personally practice yoga a lot, and I appreciated the statement, help youth get out of their heads and into their bodies. I think that one thing that we also learned from today's presentation is the importance of always being truthful. That's being truthful with the youth, being truthful with the caregivers, being truthful with the other providers about exactly what the expectations are for the folks working with each of these youth with complex care needs. And I also really appreciated Alex's reminder to keep a separation between work and your personal life. Consider the impact of secondary trauma and what is your plan for when you may be impacted by the experiences of those you work with. So with that I believe is all we have for you all today. I did see one more question, I believe, in the chat. I lost it because lots of folks are commenting in the chat and sharing their appreciation and gratitude for the folks with lived expertise on today's call. And yeah, I second everything that has been shared in the chat. It's been really inspiring to hear from you all today, and we really appreciate your time and your effort and all the work that's happening on the ground level with the Youth Engagement Project. So thank you all so much.
Thank you.
We hope everyone on the call had an opportunity to complete the evaluation, and we hope you all enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. We'll be here for a few minutes if anyone has any questions or comments.